Starting off this list in a number 10 spot, we have The Family Inside the Manson Cult. You guys, this is the first documentary I watched when I started my subscription to Magellan TV, and it is honestly what got me hooked. The Family follows the Manson family cult, of course, and shows the days leading up to the day of the Tate and LaBianca killings. This documentary has interviews with people who were actually a part of the cult, and even includes Linda Kasabian, who was the getaway driver on that fateful night. The interviews are coupled with reenactments of the cult that really help the viewer dive into the late 1960s and the world that they were living in. This documentary gives us a very in-depth view as to how this cult worked, and shows us how the people in the cult were under the spell of Charles Manson himself. It is a pretty unbelievable story that ended in such tragedy, and this documentary really does an amazing job at showing us a part of the story that is not often talked about. Coming in at number 9, we have The Nightmare. The Nightmare, which is directed by Rodney Asher, follows the topic of sleep paralysis. This documentary premiered at the 2015 Sundance Film Festival and was widely well received. If you don't know, sleep paralysis is when a person finds themselves unable to move or speak while they are falling asleep or just waking up. This temporary paralysis is often accompanied by some pretty horrifying visions, and if you've ever experienced sleep paralysis or know someone who's experienced it, you know how terrifying it can be. This documentary follows people who have experienced sleep paralysis in their lives. The participants explain their experiences and hallucinations as the film reenacts what they've seen. The scariest part of this documentary is when they mention that just knowing about sleep paralysis can be enough to cause you to experience it. In our number 8 spot today, we have There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane is an absolute whirlwind of a documentary. It follows different interviews with family and friends of Diane Schuler. You might currently be wondering who Diane Schuler is. Well, Diane Schuler was a woman who passed away in 2009 after she was driving her van into oncoming traffic and ended up crashing head-on into another vehicle. Between the two cars involved in the collision, all 8 passengers ended up passing away, so it truly was a pretty gruesome and tragic event. The documentary strives to put together what exactly happened and why this completely avoidable accident occurred in the first place. After the accident, Diane's toxicology report showed that she was intoxicated with both alcohol and THC, but no one in the family knew Diane to abuse either of these substances, as well as the fact that when she was last seen, right before the accident, no one believed she appeared to be intoxicated at all. This documentary really tries to put together all of the missing pieces of what happened on July 26th, 2009, and is one of the most thrilling documentaries I've seen. In our number 7 spot today, we have Dreams of a Life. Dreams of a Life is a documentary following the story of Joyce Carol Vincent. Joyce was a 36-year-old woman who was found in her home in 2006, almost 3 years after she had passed away. The details around her death have become a mystery due to the time it took them to find her and all of the decomposition that had already happened. How could a 36-year-old woman not be reported missing for all that time? How had no one noticed for 3 years? When she was found, the TV was still on and she had wrapped but unmarked Christmas gifts surrounding her. The documentary follows the case and investigation as well as different interviews with people who knew Joyce so that we really get a sense of who she was and what her life was like. This documentary really leaves you on edge as you want to know all of the answers to the questions that Joyce's passing brings. In our number 6 spot today, we have The Staircase. The Staircase is one of the most classic true crime staples as it is one of the most widely debated cases ever. In 2001, Kathleen Peterson was found dead in her home. This docuseries follows the investigation, a few of the theories surrounding the case, and the trial. Kathleen was found at the bottom of the stairs of her home, and while it was originally regarded as a fatal but accidental fall that caused her passing, as the investigation unfolds, the truth gets muddier and muddier. Kathleen's husband, Michael, has always been somewhere near the top of the suspect list, considering he was the last one to see her alive and was actually home and was supposedly in the backyard when the fall occurred. From theories of Michael's infidelities all the way to a barn owl, there's a lot of speculation about this case, and this documentary is definitely one to watch if you're a true crime lover. In our number 5 spot today, we have Cropsy. Cropsy is a documentary from 2009 that became much different and much bigger than it originally set out to be. It was created by Josh Zeman and Barbara Brancaccio as they set out to make a documentary about the New York urban legend Cropsey, which is a boogeyman type character. But what they discovered was so much more real and horrifying. This documentary research led them to the very real story of Andre Rand, who is a convicted kidnapper and suspected killer. While this documentary is a bit slower than some of the others on this list, it is so unbelievably spooky, you definitely should not watch this one alone. It shows how one terrible man's actions instilled fear into the residents of Staten Island and inspired an urban legend that is still talked about to this day. In our number 4 spot today, we have The Donner Party. The Donner Party is a documentary coming from 1992, and man, is it a wild one. The documentary follows the Donner Party, who were a group of American pioneers. The Donner Party set out in the spring of 1846 in a wagon train in an attempt to migrate from Missouri to California, but they got stuck for the entire winter in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The documentary follows the hardships they had to endure while they were out there, and it truly is shocking. There is a mix of real photographs, letters, and journal entries from the Donner Party, as well as footage of the trail they were on and testimonies from experts on what exactly went wrong. The Donner Party was trapped with little food, and they ended up being stuck for 5 whole months. The survivors had to resort to cannibalism in order to survive, so it was, of course, an extremely dire and horrible situation. This documentary is both extremely informative, but it is also absolutely terrifying when you remember that this really did happen. In our number 3 spot today, we have The Woman Who Wasn't There. This 2012 documentary is about Alicia Head. Alicia claimed to have been on the 78th floor of the World Trade Center when they were attacked on September 11th, 2001, and she said that her fiancé had been in the other tower and had unfortunately passed away. This is of course a terrible story that shocked people, and it led to Alicia being the president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network group. Eventually though, it comes to light that Alicia wasn't at the World Trade Center that day. She wasn't even in the country. This documentary aims to unravel all of the lies she's told and detail how this all happened. This documentary is certainly a bit different than the other ones on this list, but it truly does leave you with such an eerie feeling, because how could someone lie like that and get away with it for so long? In our number 2 spot today, we have The Imposter. The Imposter follows the story of the Barkley family and the horror that they had to endure. In 1994, Nicholas Barkley, who was 13 years old at the time, went missing. His family was of course scared and terribly upset, but 3 years later, Nicholas returned. Of course the family was overjoyed, but that joy quickly turns to fear, as it turns out Nicholas is not Nicholas at all, but instead a man named Frederick Borden, who is a French con man who actually spends his life impersonating missing children to their families. This documentary aims to show the events that led up to one man spending his life preying on innocent, grieving families. The story itself and the idea that someone could do that really is unbelievable, so this documentary is one you absolutely do not want to miss. In our number 1 spot today, we have Don't Mess with Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer. When I say that this was one of the most captivating documentaries I've ever seen, I really mean it. From the moment I started it, I could not stop until it was finished. This documentary follows the story of the killing of Lynn June, which is one of Canada's most infamous crimes ever. Lynn was killed by a man named Luca Magnotta, who was already stirring up some internet buzz and who was posting some pretty horrific videos before this crime even happened. The documentary follows a couple of unbelievable cyber sleuths who saw Luca's messed up videos and who were intent on finding out who he was and where he was before this killing happened. The crimes themselves are absolutely horrible, the story is almost unbelievable, but the work the cyber sleuths do is honestly incredible. The documentary really has it all if you're a true crime person. It is really hard to watch because of how tragic it is, but it is definitely worth it if you can get through it.
Starting us off at number 10 are the confession tapes. Oh my god, I watched the first episode of this a few years ago at my sister's place, and I got so disturbed I did not go home and sleep at home. I was like, no, I'm not sleeping over over there. Ain't no one killing me today. Haha, no. Released on Netflix back in 2017, the show is a true crime documentary series that features a bunch of false confessions that ultimately lead to wrongful convictions. And they go into detail about the undercover sting operations that police undertake in order to get these people to confess to something they didn't do. It's dirty and it's horrible to just watch people getting manipulated like that, but you can't take your eyes away at the same time. There's 2 seasons, so around 11 episodes, so it's definitely doable if you need a bit of a scare one night. I highly recommend it. Coming in at number 9 is Trial by Media. So I finished this one myself a few weeks ago and it was disturbing but needed, if that makes any sense. It came out on Netflix this year and it showcases how criminal cases and people's views can be so impacted by the media and its portrayal of events. And of course, I know we all know this already, but the documentary explores a memorable trial in each episode. For example, the first rape case trial to ever be televised in history, and how many supporters the perpetrators got after being convicted despite them being the bad guys. It's super interesting and very much worth the watch. You realize how easily extensive media coverage can affect the outcome of these trials. Everyone likes courtroom dramas like Suits, so imagine the real thing. At number 8 we have The Nightmare. Now if you want to meet the demons in your mind and the ones roaming around your bed when it's pitch black, then this is the documentary for you. Released in 2015, the docu-film focuses on sleep paralysis and everything that comes with it. The inability to move or speak or even react to whatever nightmare they're seeing. Sleep paralysis can induce hallucinations and physical experiences of the darkest of nature. The film had a bunch of participants share their experiences and then they recreated it. I'd probably hallucinate being underwater with a massive great white coming my way. I may not be able to move, but I can still definitely my bed. Filling our number 7 slot is Going Clear. I feel like every few years my obsession with Scientology comes back and I start watching all these documentaries and movies about it and I'm like, madness! This is a madness! No, it's not madness. No, this is a pyramid scheme, people. So released on HBO back in 2015, Going Clear is a 2-hour documentary showing the true nitty-gritty parts of the Church of Scientology. How members of the cult threaten and blackmail other members, and if you leave the church, they literally harass you. What other religion makes you pay thousands of dollars to achieve a higher level of enlightenment? The church drains your bank account in any way possible. Sea Org members sign their lives away by signing a billion-year contract and get a few dollars a week as allowance for all the that they do. It's such a secretive organization. No one has seen Kelly Miscavige in public for years, so it's like, did they kill her? What did they do to her? Did Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes divorce because of the church? Most likely. How can so many people follow a religion that comes from a science fiction novel? Keyword: fiction. Now at number 6 is Madness in the Fast Lane. Now I included the case of this documentary a while ago in another video, but here's the general premise. Back in May of 2008, Swedish twin sisters Ursula and Sabina Eriksson were filmed repeatedly running across a busy M6 highway. They were hit by oncoming traffic multiple times, and then Ursula even went under the wheels of a large truck, yet remained completely unharmed. As the twins were being talked to by police, one of them gets free and runs right in front of an oncoming lorry, and then the other one runs out and gets hit by a car. The lorry twin is in critical condition, but the other one is remarkably fine despite being in an accident that would usually kill someone. After being released, Sabina ends up stabbing a man to death a few days later, and apparently they both suffer from a very rare form of shared psychosis, where the mental health of one influences the other one's sanity. The documentary tries to make their behavior make sense with the help of a criminal psychiatrist. Coming in at number 5 is Dreams of a Life. This one really makes you think about who would truly miss you if you died. Released back in 2011, this drama documentary tells the story of Joyce Carol Vincent, a woman who was found dead in her London apartment back in 2006. Only problem was, she had died in December of 2003 and no one had noticed she was gone for 3 years. Her body was surrounded by her still wrapped Christmas presents and the TV on. How unbelievably sad. By the time they found her, her body had decomposed so much that there was no way to figure out how she had even died. So the documentary interviews people who knew Joyce, friends, exes, even acquaintances, to try and find out how someone can die so close to a busy street in one of the most populated cities in the world and not be noticed. At At number 4 is tabloids. This docu-film came out back in 2010 and it tells us about the love story of Joyce McKinney and Kirk Anderson. I mean, no, I wouldn't go as far as to call it that, but the story goes as normal. Boy and girl meet, they fall in love, but the boy turns out to be Mormon, the girl is not, and he becomes a missionary and is sent to London without even telling the girl or breaking up with her. See, not so common. Joyce became so paranoid about the church keeping them apart, she hired a pilot and bodyguard and went to London and essentially kidnapped Kirk. She took him to a house she had rented with handcuffs and other toys and repeatedly assaulted him, but she of course said everything was consensual. Kirk claimed she'd said she would continue until she got pregnant and actually forced him into her car at gunpoint. He then proposed to her in hopes that she would free him, and by then he was already reported as a missing person. The authorities eventually got involved, but seeing and hearing both sides of the story is just so disturbing. Like, Joyce literally thinks she's done nothing wrong. You may also know this case as the Mormon sex in chains case, which kind of sounds better than what I said. Filling at number 3 slot is Jesus Camp. I feel like Islamophobia has reached such an all-time high right now, and this documentary shows that pretty clearly. Most of you have probably heard of the 2006 documentary Jesus Camp because it was huge. It follows Kids on Fire, a Christian summer camp for kids where you'd think they'd be learning hymns and sermons and making friendship bracelets, but it's not even close. Their days are filled with preaching Islamophobia, homophobia, and a militant, violent call of action to anyone that doesn't have Christian beliefs. The camp teaches kids how they have prophetic powers and how they have to take America back in the name of Christ. They literally tell the kids that Muslim children in the East are taught the same thing about Americans and how they get taught how to use bombs and weapons in their own summer camps at that age, and of course how they should be doing the same. People have said it's the most authentic representation of the evangelical Christian community. I've actually seen this and it was pretty messed up. It attracted so much controversy that the camp actually got shut down, or rather rebranded. Now at number 2 is Titacut Follies. If there's one genre of documentaries I love more than any other, it's definitely the ones featuring old mental asylums and institutions and how everything worked back then. Yo, this video is making me realize I'm dark as hell. Either way, this documentary was released back in 1967, so it's probably the oldest one on the list, but it explores the lives of the patient inmates of Bridgewater State Hospital for the criminally insane. It shows you how badly these people were treated, their empty cells, the fact they were force-fed and stripped in public. The superintendent would only let the director film subjects who were deemed the most mentally competent, which made the whole thing that much shadier. You guys have seen American Horror Story Asylum, like going on behind the scenes, we all know it. When it was released, the state got involved, claiming it violated the patient's privacy despite them all saying it was okay to be filmed. But really, the state was just worried because the documentary was making the state-owned institution look bad because it was bad. It was banned multiple times but then released again in 1991, and by that time it had already helped so many abusive psychiatric wards shut down. So I mean, go there. And finally, at number 1 is Abducted in Plain Sight. This one was the most popular true crime docu-film on Netflix for a really long time, and I can't even tell you how many times I hovered over it before working up the balls to actually watch it. It's released back in 2017. The film follows the kidnapping of Idaho teenager Jan Broberg Felt by her neighbor Robert Berchtold. And he didn't just kidnap her once, he kidnapped her twice. Reddit user Heather P12 even said it was plain creepy and messed up from the very first second. It was voted as best documentary 4 times, so I mean, you may as well watch it.
Starting off this countdown, we have Voyeur. This documentary surrounds Gerald Foes and the motel he bought in the 1960s. Basically, he got this motel and then rigged it so that he could spy on all of the guests that stayed there. In particular, he installed grills in the ceiling of most of the rooms. Then he would go up to the attic and he could watch the people in the room through these grills. In particular, he liked to watch people get it on. It's just very unsettling, and honestly, might make you want to rethink spending the night at a hotel. I swear, the next time I stay over anywhere, I'm inspecting the place top to bottom. And at number 9, we have The Inconvenient Truth. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helps us out, and I appreciate it, so hit it for me. Hit it, Fergie. I remember watching this documentary in grade 9 geography class, and it basically scared the crap out of me. Basically, the film is all about global warming and how humans are completely destroying the Earth. It also talks about how if we don't change our ways, we could quite literally make Earth inhabitable, which is absolutely terrifying. It then goes into detail discussing all the things that are happening to the world because of climate change, like the glaciers melting, and how that is rising our sea levels and then causing flooding. The whole movie just really emphasizes how badly we need to make a change, because we have really messed up Earth. With that being said, this documentary will scare you into wanting to make a change. It did that for me, and now I'm conscious about the little things, like making sure I always toss away trash in the appropriate bins. And I try to thrift all my clothes instead of buying fast fashion. So maybe go watch this documentary if you kind of want a reality check. In our 8th spot, we have the Ted Bundy tapes. Ted Bundy was an infamous serial killer who is responsible for the death of 30 women, although it's thought that his number is probably much higher. The documentary Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, features real-life recordings of Ted Bundy. Some were taken while he was on death row. Apparently, he thought that by doing these interviews, he could push back the date of his death sentence. Also, he had a habit of manipulating the reporters, and you can hear it in his voice and how he answers some of the questions. I think the scariest thing is how he never said that this is what he did, but instead he worded it as if like, suppose I was in this situation, or this is what the killer might have done. So that was his way of admitting to his crimes without actually admitting to his crimes, which is very creepy. This documentary will give you the creeps. Just hearing everything he did and seeing crime scene photos, it's just a lot. Coming in at number 7, we have Unsolved Mysteries. Now, this is a documentary show, and I am absolutely addicted to it. Each episode discusses a new mystery that hasn't been solved, like the disappearance and murder of Ray Rivera. In 2006, one night, Ray got a phone call and then rushed from his home. That was the last time anyone had seen or heard Ray alive. Days later, his body was found in a hotel in Baltimore. Apparently, he had jumped from one building and then crashed through the roof of the hotel. Except so many things don't add up. Like how his glasses laid beside him with no scratches at all, and they weren't broken by the fall. His wife also found a mysterious cryptic code left behind by Ray, which was taped to the back of his computer. Sadly, we still don't know what really happened to Ray. Then there's another story about a hairdresser named Patrice. She disappeared from her work in just 13 minutes. We don't know what happened within those 13 minutes or who took Patrice's life. All these real-life stories will have you on the edge of your seat. What sucks though is that they're unsolved, so you will desperately want to figure out what happened. While at the same time, you might kind of get paranoid watching this because, you know, it's all about scary abductions and murders. In our 6th spot, we have Deadly Dates. Who here is currently using a dating app? Maybe you're on Tinder or Bumble or Grindr, I don't know. Well, if you have a dating app, delete it right now. The documentary series Deadly Dates is all about the dark side of the web and the horrors of online dating. Because not everyone is how they appear to be online. Take the story of the young woman named Nadine, for example. Her story was featured in the first episode of Deadly Dates. Nadine met a man named Sammy Almari on a dating app. He told her he was a wealthy businessman and often spoiled her with gifts. They met up and everything was going fine until he became obsessed with her. And he was also very jealous. When Nadine tried to end the relationship, he ended up taking her life and then stole her phone to send taunting text messages to her family members. It's honestly a very dark case. I'm telling you, this series is gonna make you want to be single forever. It just shows you how scary people can really be, especially when you don't know everything about them. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Abducted in Plain Sight. This documentary really got to me. Basically, it's about a man named Robert Berchtold and his unhealthy obsession with the girl next door. Back in the 1970s, the Broberg family, consisting of Robert and Mary Ann and their 3 young daughters, Jan, Karen, and Susan, became really close to their next door neighbors, Robert Berchtold and his wife and kids. They became so close that they started referring to him as B, and he acted like the girl's second father. However, B became very obsessed with Jan, so much so that in 1974 he kidnapped her for 5 weeks. He groomed and brainwashed Jan and told her that they were abducted by aliens. He said the aliens assigned them with a mission to give birth to a child before her 16th birthday. or else, if they didn't, it would put her family at risk. He also fell in love with Jan and kept saying he was going to marry her. He also convinced Jan that she was meant to marry him. Then in 1976, B abducted Jan for a second time. He manipulated the family and Jan the entire time. Jan lived in constant fear that if she didn't do what the aliens were telling her to do, then her family would die as a result. Like, this is just an elaborate story all about brainwashing. It is so sick and twisted. The story will make you frustrated. In our fourth spot, we have The Faces of Death. This documentary is one that will change your life forever because it will literally scar you. It was so graphic that it was banned in 40 countries. It's just terribly gruesome. The film contains real footage of dead or dying humans and animals. In one scene, you see a body being sliced open in an autopsy. Another scene shows a man being electrocuted, and in another, you see a monkey get beat to death by a hammer. That's not all, the list goes on and on. There's just so much gruesome content shown in this film. It's basically like they collected the most disturbing real-life footages from all over the world and just compiled them together for this film. So, unless you never want to sleep again, don't watch this documentary. In our third spot, we have Food Inc. I had to watch this documentary back in high school and it changed the way I looked at food for the longest time. Basically, it's all about how the entire food industry is run by only a couple of big organizations. And the way they are doing things aren't the most ethical. Like how chickens are being injected with so much hormones just to get them fatter, or how animals that are raised for killing are just treated so inhumanely. Like there's clips of them being whipped and pushed around. It will honestly break your heart. Not only that, but they share gross statistics, like how when you eat one hamburger, it actually is composed of multiple cows ground together. I don't know, that stuff just weirds me out. Like there's some things I just never need to know, and that was one of them. It also touches on the fast food industry and how it drastically changed throughout the years and how toxic it really is for us. I'm telling you, this documentary will change the way you see food forever. Moving on, at number 2, we have Cropsey. If you guys are obsessed with urban legends, then chances are you have heard the legend of Cropsey. This tale originated in Staten Island, where kids believed that the boogeyman named Cropsey would live in the woods and would attack and disembowel the young. Other versions say that he is an axe murderer, but no matter what version you hear, basically he's just a killer that will hunt and attack the young. Turns out that the story of Cropsey is very much real, and this documentary talks all about it. In particular, they focus on Andre Rand. In 1987, Rand was responsible for a bunch of disappearances and deaths that happened in the 1970s. He even lived in the woods part-time. So he was the real-life Cropsey everyone was talking about. So yeah, the story of Cropsey was used to scare kids into coming home before dark. Parents used it as a cautionary tale. But in the end, the story is indeed real. And in our number 1 spot, we have Seaspiracy. This documentary is currently trending on Netflix, and everyone everywhere is posting about it. This documentary discusses the negative environmental impacts of fishing. From the pollution in the ocean to overfishing and ghost nets, it shows you just how problematic the big fishing industries are. And honestly, it makes you feel sorry for the marine life that we're killing. Like, a number of whales and dolphins have been found dead with plastic in their system. It's so sad and scary. I know a lot of people who have seen this documentary and are like, "Okay, I'm never eating fish again." So it's very eye-opening to say the least.